So although I'm some guy on the internet here to complain about how gaming just ain't what it used to be, sonny boy, I actually have scientific evidence to back this up. Games, and to a larger degree, Western games, take too long to make. Where's my data? Well, actually, it's the release schedules. What's your favorite game studio? Rockstar? Bugthesda? BioGay? Let's talk about your favorite poorly written and increasingly normie designed Bethesda games. The hype of Bethesda, before Fallout 76, was built primarily on the perceived quality of the titles released in the 7th generation. Oblivion, Fallout 3, and even Skyrim, all on the same console. That's a lot of games! Lots of the story is bland in these games, and the RPG elements are repeatedly dumbed down as these games progress, but in the end, I think I kinda get the Bethesda stan logic. More content is better. Some people simply want to play games. If your two checkboxes you care about is content and fun factor, then Bethesda certainly has you covered. Now on to the 8th generation. We got Fallout 4, and Bethesda Game Studios helped their Austin studio with Fallout 76, if you can call that helping. And that was it. So Bethesda actually started failing by their own standards. Where's the content? Granted, the 8th generation was a bit shorter than the 7th, but they haven't even released their next game yet. Look at Rockstar. Okay, let's not even mention how good their 6th generation of games were. Okay, no. We gotta mention it. We gotta mention GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, Midnight Club 2, Manhunt, Manhunt 2, Red Dead Revolver. I guess nobody likes that game. The Warriors. Wait. A good licensed movie game that came out like 100 years after the film came out? How did this even get made? And Bully. Look at their 7th generation. GTA 4, Midnight Club LA, Red Dead Redemption, Max Payne 3, GTA 5. Now look at their 8th generation. Red Dead 2. Wait. What happened? We not only lost the quality, but the diversity of titles and experimentation into new IP of older Rockstar. BioWare, 7th generation, Dragon Age 1, 2, the Mass Effect trilogy, The Old Republic, Dragon Age 3, kinda. It was on both generations. Some of these games are some of the highest rated ever, like them or not. If you're patient enough to get through these boring Mass Effect games with empty worlds, stock sci-fi world building, and little role-playing, then more power to you. Insulting my own audience. Smash like. Regardless, they churn these games out like it was a business. Because it was a business. Now look at 8th generation. They had Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, Dragon Age 3, kinda, again, and that was it? Where are all the games? Where are the games? Bungie used to pump out Halo after Halo, with every game more or less being considered one of the best ever made. Look at this release schedule of generally beloved games. Then 343 steps in, and by their 2nd game starts making some content mishaps. Halo 5 wasn't complete at launch, so it was kinda like a 4-year development cycle. Once the needed DLC released, and then Infinite comes after the longest wait between mainline Halo games. But okay. Devil's advocate, after Halo 5's updates, it was still a 5-year wait until Infinite. And then Infinite has less content at launch than Halo 5. So when is Halo Infinite gonna be finished? 1 or 2 more years? So a 6 or 7 year wait for what Bungie always did in 3. Disappointing! Uncharted Trilogy and The Last of Us on PS3. Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 2 on PS4. As well as a bigger DLC for Uncharted. 4 games, 2 games. Just to put our modern standards to the test of how long it should take to make good games, Final Fantasy 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were all released within a 7-year period across 3 generations. That's 3 generations. 3 is bigger than 2. My big brain hat is on. I am ascending to the paramount realm. I'm bigger, my brain is big. Yes, a 7-year period, and most of them were considered good or even all-time greats. Yeah, let's not even go down the whole fan reception angle of the modern games that already take too long to release. That would be far too depressing. All 4 original Team Silent games were released within a 5-year period, with a jump of technology between 1 and 2. The first 3 are considered some of the best games ever, and 4 even has some fans. So what happened here? What happened to gaming? Now, that's not to act like there isn't leadership change-ups, technical snags, direction changes, engine problems, and publisher pressure that create slowdown in making these games. All of these are factors, and that's my point. Why did these things in the past happen less, or at least affected the end product's weight less? Now, this is where we get into speculation. I'm not an industry insider, so unlike Jason Schreier, I can't leak games people have worked on in secret for years and ruin the reveal. But I think there's a lot of factors here, so let's go over some. The first to mention is the crisis of experience that is shaking the corporate world in America. Companies over the last few decades have been restructured not to favor seniority, experience, or results. They instead favor a piece of paper given to you based on your 2,000-word essay on why Othello proves Shakespeare was black. This has caused a lack of knowledge and a breakdown of the natural passing down of generational wisdom that came previously. Companies value college-educated idiots over experience because they punched the numbers and found out it gives more centralized power and money to the executive branch. I don't know how much of this affects the game industry, because again, I am not a game industry, but in looking at its fruit, it's hard not to draw this conclusion. Look at a game developer like Satoru Iwata, someone who started by programming games on a calculator and went on to be in charge of great games at various phases in gaming. 2D, 3D, didn't matter, he did it all, and even personally helped get many projects back on track with his expertise. It's hard to imagine even good young game developers nowadays having that type of knowledge and perspective, because though they have the benefit of learning, they do not have the benefit of experience. The fact that the general populace has gotten dumber doesn't help games get made any quicker either. The general hatred for experience of elders and the older generations that young people have isn't healthy in any way. The youth who think that movies like The Last Jedi are a masterpiece because their dad never gave them that treehouse he promised aren't trustworthy. Anger against age is a great way of killing leadership in a company, which brings me to my next point. The lack of leadership and direction seems to be a huge problem in gaming, as laid out by leaks relating to cancellation of games, as well as employer reviews of gaming companies. Look at Cyberpunk 2077. It started off as a third-person shooter with supposedly heavy pen and paper RPG elements. This changed to first-person. Early footage shows more heavy RPG elements, and the release shows a huge amount of content that was scrapped because of technical or time constraints. My point is the developers wasted time designing and making games that we never got. There is a lot of this in gaming, so it's not necessarily a sign of bad leadership. I mean, look at BioShock's original pitch versus what we got. That's two totally different games. So it's not always bad, but a changing direction makes it easy for games to get off track quickly. And with every single choice in development mattering, just one major time management failure can lead to the game failing. Game development is complex, so losing leads or the leaders constantly changing their mind isn't good for the project usually. Leaders are great at telling people no, too. Cyberpunk was marketed to be some sort of GTA mixed with New Vegas with high interactivity in the environment and smooth COD gameplay. And it's the biggest open world game ever, with even cutscenes for your player character. Well, barely any of that is in the game. It fails to have the agency of New Vegas, the dynamic world mechanics of GTA like cops, the neat details of destructible cars, or AI, and this game is not very interactive either. The cutscenes didn't even make it into the game. This part of the game is the only place with destructible environments. I guess you delivered that premise of having destructible environments in your own little twisted way by putting it in this one apartment. Look at all these activities and promises of an active, lively world in the trailer. I mean, come on now, guys. Rather than saying, hey, let's mix New Vegas with smaller scale GTA mechanics with Blade Runner and call it a day, they wanted the game to be great at everything. No game can be that great at everything. Trying to one-up everything in the gaming landscape at once is a recipe for disaster. No studio on Earth exists that can make the game Cyberpunk pitched without some catch. And if CD Projekt Red actually realized this, then perhaps the game would have been good. We've all heard the saying, aim for the moon, and if you fail, at least you'll be among the stars. You know, on your second grade math teacher's wall. But I would like to propose a different illustration for gaming. If you aim for the moon without the proper fuel, equipment, team, and food, then you're gonna die in space. And there's nothing admirable about that. Just like there's nothing admirable about overly ambitious games that can barely hit any of their goals. Instead of testing the rocket or simply going into orbit, meaning making a successful, smaller project, these developers are jumping the shark and aiming too high. Knowing your limits is a key part of game development. Another problem is too many cooks in the kitchen. In teams of hundreds of people, it's hard to have good leaders and a cohesive vision. It's hard to even be on the same page in coding, so giant teams making giant games all the time means they are constantly going in different directions. Smaller teams make developers acknowledge their limitation and find creative avenues around it, as well as finding a creative voice in mechanics, story, etc. Microtransactions, battle royale, and battle passes are perhaps the worst thing to ever happen to gaming. It has led to different content models for games, not relating to releases and playable content, but relating to purchasable and earnable content. So instead of setting up that game developer sweatshop to make those sweet, sweet games, they out here sweating to make some sweet, sweet skins. Hey, that's my sweatshop and I want them to make me good games. Their goal is to make people play more or buy more, not actually make good games. This is a totally different type of content model than usual. It's incredibly hostile to single-player experiences, and its implementation in games not called Fortnite is less than stellar. The Halo Infinite store. Need I say more? The popularity of live service games leads single-player developers to either be tempted by the model or feel insecure that people actually play their boring single-player game, which means single-player games gotta chase those single-player trends like being an open-world game. Developers look at money and greed more than making a good game and a few DLCs and moving on. The priority is not always specific releases anymore. You can make the argument that Battle Pass is the least predatory form of microtransaction released so far, but least predatory is still predatory. Games making more and more money from microtransactions incentivizes less releases and more fake content. The politics of developers is also another area that probably causes huge problems in development. When you're actively trying to fight for or against the social justice agenda, regardless of which side wins, a lot of energy has been lost. People leave companies and are fired, art is censored and demanded to be changed. When people care about whether or not there is a pronoun option in the character creator, or what color the zombies are, or whether or not Leatherface can take off black people's faces because it's blackface, your focus is not in the right area. The division the woke crowd creates amongst developers is likely terrible, with diversity hires, race training, white guilt sessions, rewrites of stories, and redesigns of characters based on these ideologies. They are focused on the character's genitals and shade rather than the game being made. Chasing trends and graphics is likely the biggest cause of the ballooning timeline in game creation imaginable. Every game has got to be pushing the envelope of realistic graphics, when honestly, the late 7th generation looks pretty good to me. Games like Halo Reach and Halo 4 look far superior in their environments and graphical style than, say, Halo Infinite. Yes, the polygon count is higher, but polygon count isn't everything. Games like Splinter Cell Conviction or Blacklist look great. Look at The Last of Us 1. I mean, would it really be the end of gaming if games were not allowed to get any more graphically intense than 2013 on 7th gen? I think not. I would much rather play a fun, well-designed, budget-looking game than a bad, good-looking one. And with the tax of making more and more advanced graphics with less and less noticeable results to average gamers, what's even the point? Oh, but every big studio game has to have the best graphics possible as well as motion capture faces. I mean, I can remember when you can make good facial expressions without mocap. Feel old yet? Excuse me for mentioning this, but you remember when games had stylish graphics to hide their limitation? It's not like Wind Waker is aged better than Morrowind or anything. It's also not like Wind Waker was made in less than 2 years by a smaller team because of the art style choice. Hey, but we gotta have those realistic graphics. I need more graphics. Give me more graphics. Give me more. I want to smell the pixels. Open world games are a huge issue too, because not only do they take a huge amount of time to make, but oftentimes the core gameplay mechanics the developers made for a game weren't really designed for open world games. Every game jumping on that trend and being an open world game simply makes it hard for them to make, and often they are worse for it. Another thing is, how can you chase so many trends at once? Like, we want our open world biggest game ever to also have very realistic graphics. Oh, so that's where all Bethesda's time went. Wouldn't it make sense for games with huge maps and lots of content to purposefully not pursue graphics, opting for a more stylistic approach, then shorter, more linear games could have that just insane level of advancement in graphics. That's always cool to see. I mean, these are overgeneralizations to be sure, but is it a wonder why games take so long to make when they have to look this good? And when games look this good, then games need to have marketable elements so that they can just become bigger and bigger piles of corporate demands rather than what's good for the game. So in the end, a game sequel that would have taken 2 to 3 years is now going to take 5 to 6 because we got to have those great graphics in that empty open world. Reminds me of the unhealthy diet modern movies have become. All movies got to be a big action movie relating to an IP or else it doesn't sell. So it leads to an overabundance of blockbusters when there's nothing wrong with a blockbuster. But what about comedies? What about a romance? There used to be so many choices in different types of movies, and now you get to choose between a big action movie and a pre-established IP or being a failure. The same is true for gaming. Everybody talks about how good the indie game scene is right now, but did we forget how AAA or AA developers used to make essentially what were indie-styled games? The original Silent Hills are weirdo horror indies with a small team. The focus of the stories is so out there and specific that it's clear it's made by people with an actual vision. A vision that might not be for everyone. Yeah, Angela screaming about her door monster daddy raping her isn't the sort of thing that you're gonna find in a Resident Evil game. The success of games should not cloud the fact that there wasn't some huge team making it. Each Team Silent game had like 5 or 6 characters, a dozen or less enemy types, and less than 10 environments. These games generally sold pretty good with a slump after one, but were not aimed at general audiences. Yet, they won them over. Look at Bully. Such a specific, stylish experience rooted in American school culture and comedic writing. Would such a game be made by a big studio today? Well, we know the answer to that. No. It wouldn't be made, and it hasn't been made. AAA developers used to make less mainstream and weird games, whether that was their focus or just a side game from time to time. But now most AAA games are supposed to be big, impressive game. Oftentimes, making weird games that wouldn't fit the mold gave the studio their popularity. Look at games like BioShock, Dark Souls, Alan Wake, Spec Ops: The Line, Grim Fandango, Akami, and others. Now granted, not every single one of these sold well, and oftentimes there was problems upkeeping quality like this, but there was still variety. What if AAA developers nowadays wanted to make something less marketable and more niche, that is a new IP? Leave AAA gaming then, bud. Way back when, developers made general audience games as well as more niche games. Now the niche games they used to make were not as niche as indie games today, and if they were, they usually failed, but that center, that mix between bigger budget and a vision that might have a more limited audience is what we are missing in today's gaming landscape. Now I've ranted a lot. Please make some comments on why you think gaming releases have slowed down and thoughts on the video. I've gone over my speculation, but by no means is this the end of the conversation. I don't know everything, so I'm excited to see other views on the issue. Peace out, my little homies.